Hello there, World of Tankers. Welcome to the channel. I'm, of course, your host, Untitled Blitz, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the brand new update, being 7.3, that has just rolled around the corner in World of Tanks Blitz. Now, this update brought the brand new Swedish tank line into the game. Starting off at Tier 6, being a medium tank, is the Stridsvågen 74. Moving on to Tier 7, you have the Leo, which actually carries the highest alpha in Tier 7 now for a medium at 290 average damage. Moving on to Tier 8, you move on to a Clipper, which has 3 shells in a clip, dealing 960 damage, which is the Emil 1, and finally we move on to the most wanted tanks, the auto-reloading Tier 9, the Emil 2, and the auto-reloading Kronwagen. Now, prior to this update, the only auto-reloading line you could have ground was the Italian medium. Starting off with the Progetto 65, you also have the Standard B at Tier 9 and the Pantera 44 at Tier 8. And I absolutely love everything about the auto-reloading lines because it really gives you a diverse gameplay, and you're always in the battle even when you are out of shells because you can load each one singularly. So, of course, in today's video, I'm going to be doing an in-depth review on how to run your auto-reloading tanks correctly, how to maximize your damage per minute, and prosper in those epic battle results. Now, of course, the first question is, what is the difference between an auto-reloader and an auto-loading tank? Because currently, you can see it looks just like an auto-loading vehicle. I've got 3 shells in a clip, and let's say I wanted to shoot that bunker back there. Well, of course, just like an auto-loader, I'd fire the first shell, and then 3.5 seconds later from the Intra clip, I could fire my second shell, and then, of course, 3.5 seconds later after that, I can fire my final shell. So, of course, that is exactly the same as any auto-loading tank in the game. You could easily do that with an AMX-50B, you could do that with a T-57 Heavy, but the thing about the Kronwagen that is extremely different is you can see now, I have another shell back, and a normal autoloader can't do that because, of course, it has to reload its entire clip. So it's actually very different on the way this vehicle works because it makes you always flexible in any scenario. You can dump out your entire clip on an enemy tank and then reload a singular shot back into them, and it will stop them from pushing on you, where if you're in a T-57 Heavy and you shoot your clip into somebody, oh, you know they're not going to be happy with you, and they're going to start rushing. But, of course, that is not the only little tricks about the Kronwagen because, of course, it has bad damage per minute listed on it. It's only sitting at 1900 effective damage per minute, which actually throws a lot of people off on the line. A lot of people say that just because of the damage per minute being so poor, they don't want to grind the tank. But the thing that people don't understand is, first of all, you get 1200 damage out in a matter of 7.5, or actually just 7 seconds. So I can shoot off all 3 of these shells here, and in a matter of 7 seconds, that will be 1200 damage dealt into the enemy opponents. So let's say I penetrated all 3 of these shots, that is 1200 damage. Now, if you start adding on a minute of time now with that 1200 damage, that means that effectively you're going to be dealing 3200 damage in that singular minute. So if you're able to get that reload out and you're able to get 3 shells into the enemy and then you start pumping single shots into them, you are actually going to be making your damage per minute sitting at around 3200, which of course is a way more respectable number, but of course you have to penetrate all of your shells and you have to make them really count on when you're using the clip, because you can see there's 1 second left on my reload. But wait a sec, I just fired my shell and that shot there just completely disappeared. Well, that's one of the biggest issues with the Kronwagen and the auto-reloading aspect, is when should you fire. You can see again there's 1 second left here on my shell and I can fire right before it reloads and I don't get that shell in the gun. That's one thing you always need to think about, is should you keep the shot to shoot the enemy or should you fire, because you're losing damage per minute every second you waste in this vehicle. The longer you take here, the more time you keep aiming at the enemy. You can see that reload on that second shell keeps going down and down, and sometimes you actually might want to keep your shell, wait until you get 2 or even 3 shells in the clip before you start shooting the enemy. So of course, let's go into a replay and start talking about how to use the tank effectively when you are trying to save shells and use your damage per minute correctly. Now, one of the most frequent questions I have been asked about the Kronwagen is how to make your damage per minute the most effective possible, because when you look at the reload times between each shot, it seems like they get smaller every single shell. It starts off at 11.24 seconds for the first shot if you're running calibrated. It then goes down to 8.94, and the final shell is around 9.07. So you'd think, well, hey, if I shoot off the first shell and then I wait and I shoot off the second one, then it's going to be the quickest reload because those shells are going to take 9 and 8 seconds to reload, where the first shot on the vehicle is going to take 11.25. And while you might think that that is the most effective way to use your damage per minute, it's actually very tricky on the way it works because, of course, there's an intra-clip reload. Of course, you can't just shoot off 1200 damage in a matter of 1 second. So the intra-clip, the way it works is, as you can see here, I'm about to load my 3rd shell. And if I'm to fire off a single shell, it's going to take 3.5 seconds before I'm able to fire my 2nd shot. Now, that also counts for the reload. You are not able to start reloading that third shell until the Intra clip is finished. So what that means is that it's actually going to be 9 seconds added to another 3.5, which is going to be a way longer reload. Of course, it's going to be 12.5 seconds than it would be for the first shell, which is 11.25. So actually, the best way to use this vehicle is to dump out the entire clip. You want to get all 3 of the shells out, dumped on the enemy. You don't want to spend as much time as possible trying to aim at them. You just want to penetrate all of your shells, get out that 1200 damage, like you're going to see this poor T-54E1 deal with right now. Once I dump out that damage, I'm going to start reloading the clip. And of course, there's no intra-clip reload when you've dumped out the entire clip. So that's the great thing, is now that I've dumped it out, it's going to take 11.25 seconds for the first shell. And because I'm not firing, I don't have to wait 3.5 seconds before the second shell to start reloading. So what's going to happen is then it's going to be 9 seconds or whatever for the second shell, and then 9 for the third. So that is going to give me way more effective damage per minute in the battle than it would if you were able to fire this tank as a single shot vehicle, or the other way around, as firing the last shell in the clip and then letting that singular one reload, because of course it's going to take longer. Now you'll notice I did make a little bit of a mistake there. I thought that my third shell was going to be loaded when I fired that shot, but obviously I fired just a smidge too early, like 0.1 seconds on the reload, and because of that it took away a shell on my clip. So that is definitely, again, where you can really hinder your damage per minute. That took away an entire shell on my vehicle. In fact, I would have had a shot there, and again, I could have waited there to wait for my last shell to load in, but I pretty much figured, hey, I'm just going to rush this T-54, get him away from me, that way I can finish him off. But in the long run, I would have been killing this T-54 if I had waited for either of those shells to load in. This is when, of course, I first started playing the vehicle, and you can definitely see how it can be more effective to wait for that last shell to load in and give you more damage per minute in the long run than it would in certain scenarios. Now there, I of course wanted to fire. Even if I could have waited another 2 seconds or 3 seconds to get that shell loaded in, then I would have been able to finish off that T-54. The thing about the Kronwagen is, while I could have done that, of course that T-54 probably would have gotten another shot into me, and I don't want to lose hit points. I'm already sitting at 2,500 damage, and I've blocked a lot as well, 1,790. The great thing about the Kronwagen, and you'll notice I did that when I was first starting to fight that T-54E1, is I put the vehicle in a hull down position, and what that means is you're hiding the hull, as it says in the title, and you're using your extremely thick turret armor. So that's going to make the Kronwagen extremely hard to penetrate, and in fact, if you're hiding those cupolas on the vehicle, which you can easily do just by using your gun depression, the tank is nearly impossible to penetrate. But again, there are a couple drawbacks with the Kronwagen. The mobility is definitely very slow. Only going 30 kilometers per hour is one thing that you really have to keep in mind. You have to pay attention where you're going constantly. You have to pay attention on where the enemy's pushing, because if you're too slow to get into the battle, of course, your effective damage per minute is dropping by the seconds. You always want to be trying to shoot, because that's, of course, going to make the vehicle so much more deadly out there on the battlefield. So once again, I have now got 3 shells loaded in my clip, and this is where I'm going to start shooting at that mountain, trying to get out as many shells as I can into the side. So there's 1 shell, there's 2 shells, and hopefully we're going to be able to get a 3rd shell out. Are we? Yes, we are. So there you go. That clip was over 1,300 damage dumped into that mountain. Now you can see I've put on my speed boost, and I'm going to keep reloading my shells here. I might have the ability to shoot the C-100 with my first shot, of course, but I'm going to wait until I get all 3 of my shells loaded in the clip. That way it's going to give me a way more effective damage per minute here. And you can definitely see how long that clip really does take to reload here. Again, only on the last shell now reloading, and normally you would have just pulled out, but you can see here I'm waiting until I have that last shell loaded. That way I can make my damage per minute even more effective. So here we go, getting that first shell into the track wheel of the 100. Now of course I can make my DPM even more effective, tracking him once again. That's the great thing about the Autoreloaders. And here we go, getting a final shell into that E100. And of course, if I was in an AMX 50B or any other tank in this scenario, I would not be able to get another shell into the E100 here. But because I'm using an auto-reloading tank, I can get 1 final shell loaded into the turret of that guy, even getting a pretty nice bounce on my own. So this was a pretty good game to show how the auto-reloading aspects works, when you want to save your shots, when you don't. Now my rule of thumb is that if there's about 5 seconds left for the last shell, I try and save it depending on who I'm aiming at. If the enemy vehicle, of course, pulls out and they're trying to shoot me, I'm going to shoot them back. I'm not going to wait unless there's like 0.1 seconds left for that second shot. But at the same time, if I'm not being pushed on and I know that the enemy vehicle's right in front of me and they've got, let's say, 1,200 hit points, I will wait until, of course, I have a full clip loaded, because 1,200 hit points is how much damage my clip does, and effectively, on average, I should be able to kill that person with a singular clip in this vehicle. So this was a great game to show really how the Kronwagen works. 6,300 damage, pulled out that mastery, the armor works great, and honestly, the Kronwagen is a fantastic vehicle. Now, the great thing about the Emil 2 is that it actually works extremely similar to the Kronwagen as well, because it has the exact same damage per minute. It's about 20 less. So that means that you can work this tank almost exactly the same with how you want to get your shells out. The gun depression is the same as well. So both of these vehicles, in my personal opinion, are very fun to drive. If you have any questions or comments down below, please let me know, and I will feel feel greatly, and I'll be glad to respond to them because, of course, these are very tricky tanks to run, and if you don't understand the concepts, it can be very hard to get very good numbers out as well. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Of course, if you enjoyed today's video and you want to see more like it, please make sure to smash that subscribe button down below. But other than that, hopefully all of you are doing well out there. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.